Well, we are about to start our session, and as we do and bring everybody online, I want to ask how everyone's doing this morning. So some of us are drinking coffee. Oh, with this background, you have to push it back. There you go. Some of us are drinking coffee on the West Coast. Some of us are wondering what we're going to eat for dinner on the other side of the globe. So we are all over the map today. Let us know where you are in the chat so that we can shout out whether it's breakfast or dinner. So thank you again for joining us today for our session, Stronger from Our Differences, Learning from One Another. We are so glad you are engaging in this important conversation. And before we begin, I do want to note that closed captioning is available and can be enabled at the bottom of your screen. So my name is Sarah Borgman, and I am the moderator of this session. I also help to lead the Collaborative Funds Initiative at Philanthropy Together. So Philanthropy Together is a global movement to grow and strengthen the field of collective giving with programming like the We Give Summit. Today, there are more than 3,000 giving circles around the globe, and our role has been and will continue to be elevating collaborative giving in the world of philanthropy. We do this through in-person and online convenings, organizational spotlights, public relations, and marketing, all toward our ultimate mission, which is to democratize and diversify philanthropy, first with giving circles and now in the area of collaborative funds. So we are eager to create the same kind of impact in the emerging field of collaborative funding as giving circles have in the world today. Throughout the next 50 minutes or so, we will hear how we can be stronger by learning from one another's missions and models, challenges, and successes. We have an amazing group of people in this session who represent a variety of different collaborative funds, both here and in the US and globally. It's our intention to have them share a bit about what they are doing, what types of models they are employing to do that work, and some of the challenges and hard-earned wisdom they have gained along the way. We recognize we have a lot of speakers, so we'll move along at a quick clip, and hopefully you will be able to identify with what some or all have to share, and we'll be able to follow up with them after the session if some of the information deeply resonated, which we hope it does. I also want to mention that we'll be doing a random drawing of one attendee who is right here, right now, to receive a book of their choice from one of this year's speakers. The winner will be announced at the end of the session, so stay with us to see if you've been selected. Please engage with us on the chat, and we encourage you, which I think you're already doing, and we encourage you to share your feedback following this session by completing our 2-question poll. With that, let's kick off this conversation. Given the amazing amount of mind share in this session, I'm going to refrain from talking a lot about introducing some of these leaders, and I'll just say a few words and place their organizational bios in the chat in the order they will speak. So if you can go on this journey with me, I will now put it in the chat. We will kick off our conversation today with Yasmin Madan, who is the Director of Philanthropic Collaborations at Co-Impact and has the distinction of deeply understanding both the program partner and donor sides of this equation. Then we will continue with Allistair Mallillin, who is the Director of Strategy and Asset Building at the Common Council Foundation, which along with Native Americans in Philanthropy created Native Voices Rising. Native Voices Rising is designed to support organizing, advocacy, and civic engagement in American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities. Joe Tolbert leads Art at the Intersections at Waymakers Collective in the Appalachian region of the US. He is also a minister, scholar, writer, and cultural organizer whose work is at the intersections of art, culture, spirituality, and collective liberation. Joining with him today, quite literally, is Margot Miller, the Executive Director of the Appalachian Community Fund. She is also a self-described daughter of Appalachia and as a result has extremely close ties to the community in which she serves. Neera Nundy leads DASRA's initiatives in the areas of youth, urban sanitation, and democracy and governance. DASRA works deeply and widely in India with those who are most proximate to the challenges at hand. We will hear from each of the speakers on a few key topics, including the general organizational makeup of each model represented here today, the benefits of their particular model, and the pitfalls and earned wisdom our speakers have learned in the process. So we'll start with Yasmin. Thank you so much, Yasmin.
Thank you, Sarah, and just thank you to the whole team for hosting this, and what a great start. But just bringing us together as a community and sharing experience and sharing learnings and challenges, there's something to be said about that. As it's just the more collaboration and community we can have in philanthropy, the better it will be. So thank you very much for hosting. So I'll start a little bit about the co-impact model. We're a philanthropic collaboration, and we aim to bring together philanthropists, foundations, corporate partners to pool their resources and invest in initiatives that are tackling the root causes of inequities in health, education, economic systems. And the idea is that these systems provide the most basic services one needs for a fulfilling life, but today are ineffective, have bias and exclusion baked into them. And so how do we make them more effective, more just, more inclusive for millions of people in lasting ways? That's our vision. Our second fund, the Gender Fund, the ambition is to raise and deploy $1 billion to advance these just and inclusive systems by really centering intersectional gender justice and women's leadership. So this is a lot of the what we do in our model, but I think the model really is shaped by so much of the who and the how, right? So for us, the who, because we invest in the global south, all our country grants go to locally rooted, predominantly women-led organizations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, because, you know, the how, even before the how, this who of prioritizing proximate representational leadership is core to our model. And then the how is really how do we show up acknowledging power dynamics as a funder and get behind the purpose and the vision of the organizations we support. So how do we provide long-term, flexible, significantly large funding amounts? Because if you're talking about tackling inequities and looking for a reversible systemic change, then we need to have resources for the scale of that problem and flexibility. So that's the model. I'll speak to a few benefits that I hope resonate, because I think these are benefits across collaborative funds in general. And the first is the significant leverage. And I'll pass it out in two ways. One is by aggregating the capital, funders have this potential for their commitments to be truly significant, because there are more resources going towards the same agenda. And then you can resource to the scale of the problem. That is quite important. We've seen philanthropic funding tends to be finite, smaller, limited time, and very restrictive. So how do we actually make it far more flexible and large and significant? The second is, what is the role of philanthropic funding really? And for us, it is not to compensate for systems not working, but to use resources to make these systems work in, as I said, effective, just and inclusive ways. And so how do you unlock or influence the public and private financing going into it? How do you see the role of philanthropic funding as activating that financing that is much larger and much more sustained? The second benefit, I think, is impact. We speak to it in different ways, but it is the positive change in people's lives. I want to be very clear about that. And as a collaborative, as other collaboratives, you know, we have a team that brings together expertise, quality assurance. We do robust diligence and sourcing. We identify the initiatives. We support them in financial and non-financial ways, provide strategic support for systems change, learning and adaptation, organizational strengthening. So how that helps as a collaborative. Doing that together has a lot of benefits. Often the word risk gets used in philanthropy, and I first just want to state our position. Most often the risk is in not doing something, not in doing it. I want to be very clear on our position. But even then, there is this mindset of risk. And I think as a collaborative, if you take a portfolio approach, then the risk of duplicating efforts is reduced. The risk of fragmented efforts is reduced. And I think that's one of the benefits. And the last part, back to the spirit of community, it's coming together as funders to complement the work, to learn with the program partners at the same footing, and to really get behind the organizations and the social change leaders. So you said earned wisdom, pitfalls. I think what I want to lead with here is just things we grapple with that we hope we can learn from the experience of others. And one is, I think in general, systems change and intersectional gender equality is under-resourced. That is the biggest challenge I think we have. As I said, funding is in silos, project-based, limited, finite, restrictive. So how do we get more capital moving towards tackling systemic challenges and centering intersectional gender equality within that? The second is, funders have the resources, and tend to like control and choice, no doubt about it. But actually, what is needed is collaboration and community. So how do you let go of control and choice in the interest of scale and learning and leveraging? I think is something would love to learn from others. And the third is, because we get behind the vision of our partners, we don't say grantees, we say program partners. How do you actually roll up impact? Because what we resource is what our partners think are important issues. So we don't lead with our own strategy, but we get behind them. And so adding up impact and speaking to it cohesively is something I think we grapple with. And I, again, would love to learn from others. That's it for now. I'm much more excited to listen to the other speakers, but thank you for this opportunity again.
Oh, thank you, Yasmin. Quick question for you, actually. As you play the bridging role between donors and program partners, how do you navigate that personally? I know you've got deep experience in both of these areas. Maybe it's in the measurement side of things that you're talking about, or maybe it's in the unlocking more resources. But I'm just curious how you, as a human, navigate that.
So I think first, one of the beauties of being a collaborative is you raise resources and you deploy them. So keeps you humble, because it's not like you have resources that you're giving away, and that power dynamic, right? Because you realize when your program partners tell you the challenges of fundraising, you're bringing that experience yourself. I think the second is the value of, as I keep saying, community and learning. That humility, it really aligns with my personal values as well. So I really like that approach. And the third is, I think for me personally, if everybody agrees that what we're trying to do is change the system rather than compensate for it, it makes sense. I grew up in India, and you could do all the training in the world and all the investment in me and put the onus of change on me as an individual. But I think we have to realize that the systems don't work for people. And so to me, when funders get that and they're willing to get behind it and get behind the vision of the social change leaders, I think personally for me, navigating that is the joy of it. I already shared some of the challenges, but I really can't say enough about this interface between funders and program partners to have a grounding and stay humble in this.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Such wise words. You're right. Thank you again. And now we will hear from Allistair. Come on up.
Great. Well, thanks. Similarly, thank you for inviting me to speak. Super excited for this panel and hearing from all of the other folks here as well. So my name is Allistair Mallillin. I use a he, him series of pronouns. I'm our acting co-executive director at Common Council Foundation, which houses Native Voices Rising. And so Native Voices Rising was kind of started as a proof of concept for how do you actually center Native leadership and re-indigenize philanthropy, how philanthropy feels and actually what it looks like. And at the start, when NVR was formed, philanthropy is big and large. We're essentially saying they had trouble finding, building relationships with, and actually evaluating Native-led groups. And at that same time, which still perpetuates today, Native communities were only receiving just 0.5% of philanthropic dollars. And so since those early days, NVR has really been a demonstration of what happens if you trust in the leadership and voice and knowledge of Native leaders. In that first year in 2013, we moved $215,000 of grants. And then fast forward to last year, we moved $3.5 million of grants. And these grants are all general support. They're all in the range of 20 to 40,000. And at the heart of NVR is really our 50 or so community reviewers who are all Native leaders and community leaders. And so reviewers are divided into regional review committees. Each of those review committees is empowered to actually make funding recommendations on a pot of funds. And then we aggregate all of those recommendations from committees together to kind of come up with our full assortment of grants. And aside from myself, our team is fully Indigenous and actually drawn from our community reviewer universe. And so we have 2, soon to be 3, direct staffers. Then we also have a 9-person advisory council who leads on our strategy. And while our grant making is the bread and butter of Native Voices Rising, there's also some other pieces that we do that kind of help organically through that work. One is our supportive assistance work. And so we provide capacity building to groups through webinars and customized consulting projects. And then we also do field building efforts. So building awareness and interest in understanding and trying to support Native-led efforts and organizations. So that's the big spiel. I'll go to the benefits. And what I'll say is I'll start with a story actually around Native American Women's Dialogue on Infant Mortality, NADM. It's based in Seattle, Washington. When we first learned about their work in 2012, they were on a shoestring budget. We were at NVR, we were one of their first, if not the first foundation grant. Fast forward to now, and they are getting funding from national big health funders around their work around maternal health and actually scaling it up across communities. And we hear it all the time that for groups like this, the initial stamp of approval from NVR was actually what got them into other funder portfolios, because it allowed funders to think of them as a viable grant partner, especially for groups like NADM, for example, which actually still to this day don't have a website. And so for us, the three major benefits for our model in particular is that one, we have a very nimble grant making process. And so we understand that change happens on the ground very quickly, and that grant making processes need to adjust quickly to kind of recognize what is happening on the ground. And so that's what we do at NVR. Instead of waiting 2 or 3 grant cycles, we'll do it right away. The second piece is that we offer non-monetary support. So I called it our supportive assistance program. And really it's meant to build the capacity of our grant partners in a way that's helpful and responsive to their needs instead of us telling them what they need to do. And then the third thing is really our NVR grant making process is really humanizing, both from the perspective of the reviewers and for our grant partners. And so on the one hand, our reviewers, they actually feel empowered to actually make a grant making decision in a system like philanthropy, which is meant for them not to exist. And on the other hand, our grant partners, even if they don't get a grant, they feel heard, seen, and respected. And then I'll just switch really quickly to the pitfalls. And so I'll just name 3. One is all money comes with trauma. And that's a blanket statement. So we offer honorariums to our reviewers, but it wasn't until 2018 that they actually all accepted that honorarium because of the lack of funding for Native communities. They thought it was better to be put back into the grant making pool. And so that is just one of the things that we've learned very closely. The second is to always have a grant making goal, even if it's an aspirational goal. And so up until 2018, we basically granted out what we fundraised. And then in 2019, we shifted into naming a grant making goal of $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, $3.5 million. And by not having clear goals, we didn't know how robust or not robust we needed to build a process that could accommodate that grant making. And so essentially without knowing what to expect, we didn't know how to plan. And then the last thing was building trusting relationships with Native communities is hard and it's ongoing work. We have a 10-year track record of being and showing up for communities and Native communities, and particularly in times of crisis, like COVID, communities went to trusted partners like NVR. And so that's why a number of our funders and partners see NVR as a bridge and an intermediary, but it also means that there's a lot of work needed to actually build that relational capital and supports needed in those long-term relationships. And that cuts both ways, both with donors and with our groups at NVR. And so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Allistair. So you said a very interesting and amazing sentence that has been getting some chat, and that is, I think you said either money or honorarium comes with trauma. I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about that, because that is such a poignant and succinct way of describing some challenges that people are having. I'd love to hear your thoughts a little more.
Totally. And I'll say, like, that's on the honorarium side. Money is one of those things that's very traumatic, particularly for communities like Native communities who have historically not had access to resources. And in a lot of Indigenous communities, like, you know, money's not really that big of a thing comparative to how it is in the US society. And what I'll say is that also relays in how we do our grants. And so like up until 2021, really, we were giving kind of like token grants, like grant partners or applicants who weren't anywhere near our criteria for NVR, we were giving them like $1,000, $1,500 grant just because their work was important to our reviewers. Versus now where we have made this amazing shift to really actually think about like, what does it look like to really support the groups that are in line with NVR's mission. And that means that there's going to have to be some hard decisions that are made in not funding certain groups.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to close with you, Allistair, by asking, what gives you hope that you've seen recently?
Oh, it's a great question. I'm not sure I was prepared for that question.
I know, I just sprung it on you.
I would say, honestly, it's conversations like this where we can think and grow into what is a container that's big enough to hold all of our wildest dreams and imaginations. And particularly for NVR, we had lived essentially in a scarcity mindset up until 2018. And the growth that we've seen kind of moving from scarcity to abundance has really been meaningful, both for our reviewers, not only in terms of the grant making dollars that we're moving out into community, but more of like what that's doing for our individuals who are participating within NVR and what they think is possible. And, you know, you can't have something be possible without first naming it. So.
Yep, love that. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Allistair. We will now be speaking with Joe from Waymakers Collective. Welcome, Joe.
Hello.
It's Joe and Margot, and we get the benefit of having both, but we are going to hear from Joe first.
So hello, everybody, and thank you all for allowing the Waymakers to be here, as we are kind of the newbies on the block. And a little bit about our organizational model is we were given an amazing opportunity as a region of Central Appalachia to be brought together by Our Place America as they were sunsetting to really re-envision what philanthropy could mean and what large financial investments could be. And so we took a lot of inspiration from our region's long history with labor organizing. And we decided we wanted to try to do this in a collective. And so our organizational model is inspired by cooperatives and collectives. And we actually invite people to make nominations of who is doing the great work in their community, because I like to say that nobody knows the community like the people living in it. And so we based our organizational model off of a nomination process where those people are then invited to apply for our funding, and then they can opt in to being a voting member, which makes them a member of our board of directors. And from there, they can also opt in to serve on the Apple Corps, which is our steering committee. And we compensate our Apple Corps with a grant, either to them as individuals or their organizations. And we do that because we really want to honor the time and labor it takes to be in partnership with us and to move this collective work forward. And as you all know, due to the extractive economies that undergird so much of our country in the US, Central Appalachia has been undergoing really deep climate disasters that seem to be happening at higher and higher rates. And so one of the benefits of this model is not only us being able to reach underrepresented, underserved communities, but one of the benefits is that it allows us to pivot in relation to what is actually going on in the community and actually support in a way that traditional philanthropy may not be able to because of the ways that they're often structured. And so one of the benefits is the ability to pivot. And I will also say one of the benefits of working in this collective model it's also knowledge transfer, because I know when I was initially brought into this work in 2019 in that original assembly, I only had a one-side view of working at arts organizations in the region that were often underfunded. And so that kind of one-way transactional way of doing things. And through this process, I've been able to kind of demystify the workings and reimagine the workings with other folks in our region of what that could be. So the other benefit is knowledge transfer, because it allows us to empower community members with knowledge of how financing works, how grant making could work, and invite them into the power of owning these funds and empowering their community by continuing to nominate and grow this voting body that makes decisions, and learn what it means to actually have ownership over funds. Some of the challenges, though, that comes with this is we are so enculturated into an individualist mindset that we are constantly having to kind of do that culture shifting work by leaning into our model of showing people that there are truly benefits of working in this collective model where we are working together towards making our communities better. And the other thing I'll just say is that our work is truly built on a relational model, and working relationally in this way, especially when people have been harmed by philanthropy and the competitive nature that happens oftentimes in our region through traditional philanthropy, we are really seeing that working relationally really does take time, and that if you really want to center relationships in the grant making, you can't just speed through. You have to slow down. And, you know, when people see that intention, I think it's allowed them to opt into our vision. Yeah, and so I'll just stop there, just being conscious of time.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much. I'm gonna spring a question on you too. I'm going to ask you, given your role in the arts and culture space, what's a single piece of culture or art that has moved you fairly recently or within this past year?
Gosh, that is such an impossible question. I'm always consuming art. But I will say a novel by this new Black British author, Caleb Azuma Nelson, called Open Water. And Open Water is a beautiful story about these two artists that fall in love and all of the mushy stuff that comes along with that. But it also highlights very beautifully what it means to be Black in Britain, and the tension between feeling unseen in the world and then suddenly being seen by the eyes of the person you love. So it's a beautiful story, highly recommend it.
I was hopeful that one of our attendees might do a little Googling on the side and pop in the chat what that is. Thank you so much.
Yes, it is in the chat.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Margot, you're on.
All right, thank you all. This is a wonderful opportunity, especially to sit here next to my partner in all things wonderful, Joe T. And I also have to thank Zykia for opening us up with that song. I too am very much into art and culture, and that song means a lot. The whole thing of someone to lean on, I think it was very appropriate for this session. Appalachian Community Fund, our model is, or our mantra is change, not charity. And that is a model that was adopted by several organizations. And I think I saw Alice Jenkins here from Fund for Southern Communities. There's several of us that were a part of the funding exchange. And that was the mantra that we adopted, change, not charity, because we invest in organizations that are working on addressing causes of systemic oppression and poverty, particularly here in Appalachia. And with that model, we invest in organizations, grassroots organizations, oftentimes that are too small, too progressive, or just, out there, like, doing things that are getting underneath the systems and pushing the envelope. So a lot of people don't necessarily fund a lot of the folks that we invest in. So that's one thing that's very different and unique about us. We also, all of our grant making is for operating support. We definitely will support projects, but we definitely believe that we need to support people where they are, and let's let people keep the lights on. The people that make the decisions about our grants are our board members, are people that are from the community, that are working in community close to the ground, where they see the issues up front and up close and personal. So they know a lot about what's going on in the region. I think it was Allistair that talked about being nimble. There is something about the grassroots nature of ACF. And two, what Yasmin said, we are not a foundation. We are a nonprofit grant-making organization who has to raise the money for grant making and for operations. So we can relate to our grantee partners because we are in a very similar situation where they are. So we are oftentimes too the first organization for some of our grantee partners to have receive funds. The benefits of all of this is it is that nimbleness. And we do, I believe we get to invest in some of the work, some of the most cutting edge, beneficial to the region work that other groups might not be able to do because they're all trying to, I don't know, I'll just say that because I don't want to get too political this morning. And the challenges of it, I would say, one of the big challenges I see as the director working in this work, because we are investing in change and systemic change, how do you measure that? So measuring is part of the, because we still have to turn in our reports. Since we raise money, we still have to tell people what we did with the money. So being able, they say, well, how can you measure what you've done? It's very difficult. That's one of the biggest challenges that I think of doing this work, of making change, is that change doesn't happen overnight, and traditional philanthropy tends to want things to happen, at least within a grant cycle. And even within a grant cycle, the type of change that we're working on doesn't happen that quickly. So that's one of the big challenges that we see. But the benefit of the work is definitely getting to work collaboratively with our with the folks on the ground, and also with groups like Waymakers Collective, where ACF, I was actually being a part of being able to co-design that model and being able to continue to work with the Waymakers Collective in their journey in the grant making process. So that definitely is a benefit.
Thank you so much, Margot. I'm reminded of a very wise woman who once said something to the effect of, I hope I get this correctly. If somebody tried to measure the impact of Rosa Parks back in the day, they probably would have failed by today's standards. So as Kelsey said in the chat, it's very hard to, or nearly impossible sometimes, to measure deep relationships, and that is where change will happen. So thank you so much. But I've been able to actually spend some time in your area, Joe and Margot, and it's created a deep impression with me. I think I was in my early 20s. And so I wanted to ask you, Margot, as a daughter of Appalachia, what brings joy to your heart in this unique and beautiful region you get to live in?
Everything. I'm serious, everything. The people. I live in a place where I'm surrounded by mountains. I am embraced by two rivers. Like there's the Holston River, there's the Tennessee River. There are walking trails. I am a country girl, so the whole thing of the greenery, the gardens, the flora in this area is absolutely beautiful. And I love music of all kinds, and this is like the music capital of just about every type of music you've ever heard of, from bluegrass, country. We have some amazing R&B and soul artists that are here in this area. So when I say everything, Sarah, I definitely mean everything about this region I like. Now, some of the politics of the area and some of the recent laws and all that other stuff, not so much happy about, but actually the physicality of being here. I love every part of it.
Well, maybe we'll all come visit you guys.
Come visit, just let us know when, so we can make sure that we have everything ready for you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. Neera, we would love to hear from you now.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And I guess everyone's awake, but on this side of the world in Mumbai, India, we're not really asleep, but we might be getting there. So thank you for including me. And I think this format enables that all the way from the other side of the world, and so inspiring to hear my panelists before me. So I hope I can do these few minutes some justice. So I'm one of the co-founders of DASRA. It's a Sanskrit word that means enlightened giving. And we started 24 years ago when this sector perhaps wasn't as enlightened as it is now. And just hearing how vibrant it's become in, these 24, 25 years, it's just so motivating and encouraging. And the way we started was quite simple. We felt we didn't come with a whole lot of skills. We didn't come with really any resources, but really wanted to be a bridge builder to the communities, and could only do that by supporting nonprofits, and then realized very quickly supporting nonprofits without resources isn't going to go anywhere. So really we build bridges between philanthropists and nonprofits. And we started with giving circles, similar to Philanthropy Together, and our journeys are similar in the sense that we started giving circles, tried to pool money there, and now have really accelerated to see the need for pooling funds and really building collaboratives. So there's two parts of our work. We have 10 collaboratives that we run in different themes and topics, but we also have a whole lot of our work, which is around unlocking philanthropy, working with philanthropists, a lot more families and corporate philanthropy. And I apologize, but my view of the world is very much narrowed by, all of India. But that being said, we're a huge population, and that if we can move the needle and decrease the burden of SDGs here in India, we will really see a global impact. But our challenge is we have so much wealth and so much poverty, and that dichotomy is something that we've really been working towards bridging. And I think, let's not forget, right, we're just coming out of COVID, and COVID was perhaps our greatest equalizer. Perhaps the consequences not as great, but we all recognized how interconnected we are. And that's really where we saw wealth in India, privilege in India, participate and wanting to just initially help our community. But we also saw the need for nonprofits, the need for the front line to respond when we saw health systems really crumbling. And many of you would have seen that, on television. But with that came for us as DASRA a real responsibility to think about how we were supporting nonprofits, and were we really supporting the ones that were deep in the grassroots and much closer to the communities that, many of you spoke about. And we had already seen success that organizations we helped build moved into a portfolio like Co-Impact, that we really started a $50 million fund called Rebuild. And it's really to re-engage philanthropy really much closer to the community and take a lot more risk. And perhaps with this collaborative approach, although we say coming together can be de-risking, sometimes we all end up doing a little bit more of the same thing. So really trying to encourage taking more risk with this collaborative approach, and really trying to think about how does community really have a seat at the table is a lot of what we've been reimagining as we've come, out of COVID. I think that with our experience, we've raised about $350 million over the years. We have 200 families who give $150 million every year to India. So 200 families means family giving and actually being value-based and how they giving we see as one real great channel to move and take some of that risk I was speaking to. But we've also worked with over thousands of nonprofits. And this really brings me to what we perhaps haven't spoken enough about and is important in India is the role of the government. We actually see a shrinking voice, a shrinking freedom, quite a lot of fear between us and how our sector behaves and who we are or not to engage with, and whether or not we can receive foreign funds. And so a collaborative approach and creating vehicles that can enable taking on a lot more risk, but also taking on and engaging with the government is critical for some of this systems change work that we really need to do in India when you have 90% of the population going to government schools or 90% of the population, going to the health system. So what's the role of the government as it engages with collaboratives, and how do we build some of those bridges is something we've also been looking at. And I think the second thing is narrative change. We've spoken about it a little bit, but not quite really out there, that what are the words we use to describe the work we're doing, the issues, how are we making gender far more palatable for mainstream, let alone mainstreaming, philanthropy is some of what we've been doing, because the role of the media, can't be underestimated. And so really trying to bring philanthropy to some of that is what we've been, working on. I'll just end with, I think it's useful for all of us to just think about what are those sets of capabilities, and how are we as a talent pool really coming together to be a backbone, right, for these kinds of collaboratives, for these funds, to really do this edgy work is really important. And I think that if we don't think about those sets of capabilities, the risk taking, we just fear that we will also be a sector that gets, further regulated. And maybe we self-regulate ourselves, right? Let's ask ourselves, can we hold, like Margot was speaking, ourselves accountable to measure our impact? Yes, I agree, you can't measure everything, but are there certain aspects of collaborative giving that we can measure, so we're holding ourselves accountable just more on really having an impact? So I guess I'll just end with, I think it's really important for us to think about power dynamics. And a big part of a reflection for us as a team at DASRA has been to recognize our privilege. And that recognizing our privilege and not sort of shying away from it, but asking ourselves, what can we actually do with it to make a difference? And how can we take that and actually be more inclusive is a big push for us. And I hope that we can really push ourselves in this collaborative space to recognize that, but also to use it. So thank you again for including me.
Thank you so much, Neera. You said pretty quickly, passed over, that you started as giving circles or as a giving circle model and moved into collaborative funds. And the sort of eye-popping dollar amount that you guys have been able to raise, I know it's probably you need more to do what you need to do, but can you just talk for 1 second about how you moved the decision-making process from giving circles to collaborative funds?
I think we realized that it was limiting our ability to scale. And because we were running all of the giving circles, it became limited amount of funds that as soon as you opened it, and it was only one NGO. So each giving circle only supported one nonprofit. So really having a portfolio approach actually does also justice to trying to build a field. So we were asking ourselves, yes, you can get to millions of people, but are you really moving the needle on adolescent girls? And are we asking ourselves and measuring ourselves against, particular outcomes? And that's really where the collaborative approach can be quite powerful in measuring aggregate outcomes. And that's actually what we wanted to hold ourselves to. And then pool funds. So you're not at the sort of beck and call of small amounts of money or sort of pieces of money where you take that pie and you start chopping it up and selling each piece. We realized everybody's got to come into the ingredients of actually building a pie, and then everybody eats the same pie.
Oh, love it. Love the metaphor. Thank you so much, Neera. Well, let's bring everybody out on the screen. I'm going to ask everybody to think about 3 words that come to mind. This is a question that came in the chat. 3 words that come to mind when you think about the word community. And if we could all be, so I'm not actually the one spotlit, that would be fantastic. Everybody else spotlit. And we'll popcorn around. I'll pick on, let's see, Margot, can I pick on you first? What are the 3 words that come to mind when you think of community?
Neighbor, family, and road.
Road. All
Or
right,
path.
Joe. I'm sorry, say that again.
Or path.
Path. Yes. And so Joe, since you're sitting right there.
Okay, off the top of my head, reciprocity, trust, and art.
Art. Allistair?
Joe and I are on the same wavelength here. Reciprocity was definitely one of mine. And then I also wrote down accountable and love.
Oh, Yasmin?
Collaboration, strength and diversity.
And Neera?
I had togetherness, learning, and courage.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much. Oh, we really appreciate your valuable insights, authenticity, and honesty today with your pitfalls and earned wisdom. Before we wrap up, I want to remind folks we'll have a 2-question poll before we exit this meeting. And in the next few days, you can find a recording of today's sessions in your agenda as well. And the winner of today's raffle is Sandra Laney. Our team will follow up with you via email in the coming days to confirm your book of choice and mailing details. So, and if any of you are members of or leaders in collaborative funds that have been watching this today, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us via email or WOVA and we'll follow up. So thank you again. And we have a day chock full of wonderful and thoughtful sessions lined up for you, including our next session at noon, East Coast, which is a conversation with historian and author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, Ibram X. Kendi, and Jacqueline Martinez-Garcel, CEO of the Latino Community Foundation. You don't want to miss it. So we'll see you there. Thank you so much, everybody.